Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
And welcome to this very special Shabbat service, which includes within it confirmation class of 2020. We are so blessed to be able to have reached this day. We offered the opportunity for a Zoom confirmation, and they Zoomed plenty for the rest of the school year. And this is, without doubt, the most dedicated confirmation class we have ever had. A year and a half of confirmation to be standing here this day. We welcome you all, and we welcome you who have joined us via live stream. If you'd like to follow along in the service, there's a service handout that's been provided and will be available on the screen. We welcome you all as we welcome Shabbat, and we welcome our confirmands for the year 2020. Begin our service with the lighting of the candles for the festival in honor of confirmation and Shabbat. Jack?
As we kindle these festival lights, may we rekindle in our hearts the light of Torah, the light of truth. May these shining candles remind us of the flame of God which burns within us all. May we be warmed by its presence, just as these flames bring light and life and warmth to our celebration tonight. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kishanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu l'hadlik ner shel Shabbat v'shel Yom Tov.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lihadlik ner shel Shabbat v'shel Yom
We celebrate this day in holiness and in joy. We lift this cup as a symbol of the sweetness of this day, made holy by our commitment to bring happiness and joy to all the world. May the Torah ever be sweet within our mouths. May it lead us to a world of peace. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam b'rei peri hagafen.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Amen.
We enter this sanctuary to welcome Shabbat. Within these walls, we sit surrounded by numberless generations. Our ancestors built the synagogue as a visible sign of God's presence in their midst, a beacon of truth, love, and justice for all humanity. Its presence guided our ancestors to lives of righteousness, holding up to them a vision of their truest selves. Now we, in our turn, come into this sanctuary to affirm the sacredness of our lives. May we enter this place in peace. May holiness wrap around us as we cross its threshold. In the brightness of this Confirmation Eve, as we celebrate our receiving of the light of Torah, may God's presence settle upon us as we lift our hearts in prayer. What does confirmation mean to me? To answer this question, we have to trace our steps all the way back to the 9th of May, 2004. Now, this happens to be an important date for multiple reasons. For one, it was my father's 37th birthday. And slightly less important, it was also Mother's Day. However, the real reason this day is noteworthy is that it is the day of my bris. For those of you who don't know, a bris is a Jewish life cycle event in which a newborn baby is circumcised by a rabbi. Usually, brises occur within 8 days of the child's birth. However, mine had to be postponed, which I'm sure is a metaphor somehow for my life now. To me, my bris symbolizes my involuntary introduction to the Jewish religion. Whether I liked it or not, I was Jewish. At a young age, being Jewish had practically no implications on my life. My family is not the most religious of sorts, so services and other Jewish rituals didn't have a huge place in our lives. Either that or I just wasn't paying attention. However, I do blame Judaism for my superiority complex, starting in kindergarten when Noah Auerbach and I were the only 2 kids in our grade who knew Santa wasn't real. This all changed a few years later with my enrollment in the Temple Religious School. I'm not going to say my first few years in the class were eye-opening and life-changing. They mostly consisted of me futzing around with my friends. But this all changed in Rabbi Rapport's 6th grade class. The futzing stayed, but all of a sudden I had 2 major revelations. 1, I was actually going to have to learn how to read Hebrew for my bar mitzvah. And 2, because we were studying the Holocaust, I could finally grasp how momentous an occasion it was in the formation and continuance of the Jewish people. I am the descendant of Holocaust survivors. My mother's mother fled persecution in Austria months before Hitler's invasion, and my father's father survived the concentration camps, only to fight in the Israeli War of Independence, after which he came to America to start his family. My blood is rich with the perseverance and sheer strength of these survivors, and they're what power me every day to uphold my Jewish values and customs. As my life progressed and I matured, I started getting more and more involved in the Jewish community. While I still don't go to services regularly, I engage with my Judaism in different ways. Besides teaching at the Temple Religious School and, of course, confirmation class, I choose to express my Judaism in everyday activities. A prominent way I do this is by giving back, or tzedakah. Tzedakah roughly means righteousness, and is seen as the moral obligation to give back to one's community through time, money, or whatever you are able to give. I give back in many ways, but the way I'm most passionate about is education. Education is a key facet of our society, essential for the well-being of all. However, for some reason, in our society, it is not equitably distributed nor comprehensive in its execution. There are gaping holes in curriculums, leaving out the trials and tribulations of generations past. Children are left in the proverbial dust after one missed assignment. These are the modern-day plagues that blight our society. Using my Judaism as a moral compass, I aim to rehabilitate the system and provide a better future for your progeny and mine. Throughout my life, Judaism has been there with me. When returning to the original question, what does confirmation mean to me? It's hard to put into words what my journey so far has meant. I have a complicated relationship with religion, no doubt, but at the end of the day, I am, and forever will be, Jewish.
To me, being Jewish means being part of a community. While I myself am not very spiritual, Judaism is still very important in my life. I pride myself in being Jewish, even if I don't go to services every weekend. The friends I have made while in Hebrew school and from camp have become some of my closest friends, and I don't think that many of those connections would have been the same if we hadn't shared the fact that we are Jewish. Having that connection gave us something that made us different from everybody else, while also giving us something that made us similar. For a long time, I never really felt like I was Jewish. I knew that I was Jewish, but I didn't feel any sort of connection to being Jewish. I just went to Hebrew school and services because it was what my parents told me to do. It wasn't until I got older and made more connections with other Jewish people that I finally started to realize what it meant to me to be Jewish. I realized that being Jewish wasn't just about practicing the religion or going to services. Rather, it is about being part of a community. Because I am Jewish, I'm given a different perspective because I'm not the majority. I can look at certain situations from a different point of view that other people might not have. Even while writing the speech, I struggled to figure out what being Jewish meant to me. I struggled to find out what to write about and what I wanted to say. I don't really think about being Jewish every day, and Judaism isn't a major part of my everyday life like school is. Rather, it's something that is always a part of me, but not something that I focus on every day. Being Jewish is more about my identity as a person instead of how I live my life. It's about the community and the connections I've made as a Jew that make me Jewish. Being Jewish isn't the only thing that defines me, but it is probably the most impactful thing. My life would not be the same if I wasn't Jewish or if I hadn't had Judaism be such an influential part of my life. It has shaped the friends that I have made, the way that I think, and the ways that I view the world around me.
We rise now for our call to worship, the Baruch Hu.
Baruch Hu et Adonai Hambarach. Baruch Adonai Hambarach le'olam va'ed. Praise be the one to whom praise is due. Praise be the one to whom praise is due, now and forever. Please be.
Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la la la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. Baruch Hu et Adonai, Hamivorach, Hamivorach. Baruch Adonai, Hamivorach, Le'olam, Le'olam va'ed. Praise be the one to whom our praise is due. Praise be the one to whom our praise is due. Praise be the one to whom our praise is due, now and forever. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la la la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la.
Please be seated. I am a Jew, because born of Israel and having lost her, I have felt her live again in me, more living than myself.
I am a Jew because born of Israel and having regained her, I wish her to live after me more living than in myself.
I am a Jew because the faith of Israel demands of me no abdication of the mind.
I am a Jew because the faith of Israel requires of me all the devotion of my heart.
I am a Jew because in every place where suffering weeps, the Jew weeps.
I am a Jew because at every time when despair cries out, the Jew hopes.
I am a Jew because the word of Israel is the oldest and the newest.
I am a Jew because the promise of Israel is the universal promise.
I am a Jew because for Israel the world is not yet completed, we are completing it.
I am a Jew because above the nations and Israel, Israel places humanity and its unity.
I am a Jew because above humanity, image of the divine unity, Israel places the unity, which is divine. 2.5 years ago, I joined BBYO. About 2.5 months ago, Rabbi told me I had to write a speech on my favorite part of being Jewish. It wasn't long before I decided to write about BBYO. As I was writing this, I tried to think of the one thing that made me love BBYO. And as weird as it sounds, I couldn't think of it. Because there isn't just one thing. I truly love everything about it. Whether it's the people I've met, the places I've been, or the things I've learned, BBYO has made my life so much better in so many ways, and I can't imagine my life without it. When I first joined BBYO, a Jewish youth group, I had no clue what I was doing. The first thing I ever went to was a Super Bowl party. I was in 7th grade, and I really just had an okay time. I only went because my friend and I decided we would go together. The people were nice, but I wasn't really considering signing up or doing anything else, so I didn't. Until a 1.5 years later, when for some reason I decided I wanted to go to my first convention. My mom signed me up, and I went. I had a pretty good time and decided I wanted to go back. So 6 months later, I went to the next convention. I absolutely loved it. That's when I knew that BBYO was the place for me. I went to every sleepover, meeting, event, and convention I could. Then came time for elections. I decided not to run. It seemed like way too much work, and I was a freshman, so I didn't want to be stressed. Plus, I didn't know what I would run for. A few months later, I saw how much fun my friends were having on board, so I decided I wanted to run. But I still didn't know what I wanted to run for. I decided to run for Morah, the recruiter. I won the election and was super excited to be on board. But after being on for a few months, I realized that I hated being Morah, but I loved being on board. So the next term, I decided to run for the position that was the complete opposite of Morah. I ran for Shliha, the Jewish programmer, and I absolutely loved it. I loved planning services, choosing our stand-up cause, and learning about Israel. But as much as I love it, I don't think being on board is my favorite part of BBYO. It's the people. I've met my best friends through BBYO, and I couldn't imagine my life without them. I talk to them every night about some of the weirdest things, and sometimes we just sit in silence over FaceTime or laugh at absolutely nothing. Every time I get to see them at conventions, it's like no time has passed at all. No matter how long it's been, we could just sit and talk forever. I absolutely love everyone I've met in BBYO, and I'm so lucky to have met them all. Not to mention the famous people I've gotten to meet. The things I've been able to do are so amazing, and I'm beyond excited to be able to spend the next 2 years of my life in such an amazing organization. I love everything about BBYO. It has shaped me into the person I am today. And while this occasion is one to remember, my Jewish journey is continuing through BBYO.
We rise now on page 2 for the Shema.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, Adonai is our God, Adonai is one. Baruch Shem Kavod Malhuto Leolam Ba'ed. Blessed is God's glorious majesty forever and ever.
Please be seated.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך. ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשופטך ובקומך. וקשרתם
לאות על ידיך.
וחיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתם מארץ מצרים לחיות לכם לאלוהים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words which I command you on this day shall be upon your heart, shall be upon your heart. And you shall teach them diligently unto your children, and you shall speak of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, and when you lie down. and do all of my commandments, and be holy unto your God, unto your God, unto your God.
We believe in tomorrow. We believe as Jews dedicated to service to our temple and to our faith that we have the power to make tomorrow different than today. We believe that ignorance, poverty, and lack of sensitivity to the feelings, needs, or beliefs of others need not be permanent. We believe in people despite all that we know about them. We believe that there can yet be a time of peace, a time of sisterhood and brotherhood, and a time of tranquility for ourselves, for our children, and for everyone who lives on this earth. We believe that we can have a share in bringing that day closer by the way in which we live throughout the year. The world may smile at our dreams, but no matter, we still believe.
It should surprise no one that Alex's speech is a song. It should surprise no one that technology will take a second for it to actually. We rise now for the tefillah. Alex? Wait.
Adonai Svatai Tiftach Ufi Yagi Tehilatecha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel v'Elohei Leah. Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanorah, El Elyon Gomel Hasadim Tovim, V'konei Hakol v'Zocher Asdei Avot v'Himaot, Umevi Geula Livnei V'neihem, L'ma'an Shemo be'ahava, Melech Ozer u'Moshiach Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham v'Izrat Sarah. Please be seated. In the English. Eternal God, open my lips, that my mouth may declare your glory. Praise be the God of our fathers, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and Jacob. Praise be the God of our mothers, of Sarah, of Rebekah, of Leah, and Rachel. Praise be the source of our strength and courage, the source of kindness and good deeds. Praise be the source of gentleness and love, of softness and kind words. Praise be the man who transcends strength through gentleness. Praise be the woman who perfects gentleness through strength. Praise be the person who acts according to the best that is within. Praise be the person who reaches out to touch the best in others. We bless the gentle faithfulness of Abraham and the valiant strength of Sarah. Praise be the God who created with divinity a woman and a man. Now, please be seated.
In each age we receive and transmit Torah. At each moment we are addressed by the world. In each age we are challenged by our ancient teaching. At each moment we stand face to face with truth. In each age we add our wisdom to that which has gone before. At each moment the knowing heart is filled with wonder. In each age the children of Torah become its builders and seek to set the world firm on a foundation of truth. I have always been proud of my religion, but after my bat mitzvah, I thought that I would start drifting away from my Judaism. However, I have camp and BYO to thank for helping me find my love of being Jewish again. I am lucky enough to have experiences from 2 Jewish communities besides my temple that I have learned and grown from. The people I've met and the memories I've made in these communities have brought me closer to my religion and ultimately to this occasion today. Around 7 or 8 years ago, I was told about this summer camp for Jewish people called Gucci. A little reluctant at first, I eventually decided to go with 2 of my friends from home. The moment I got there, I remember meeting the most amazing people and making friends instantly. Camp is what brought me closer to my Judaism. I thought the most amazing feeling is when you are around your friends sharing the experience of being Jewish. Camp has shaped me into being a better person and has led me to thinking about what being Jewish means to me. Camp was always my escape, but unfortunately it was only my getaway once a year. When I found BYO, it felt like I was entering a side of myself that wasn't there before. For my first event, a friend and I went to a Super Bowl party, and at the end I was pretty interested in being a part of this youth group, but I didn't think it would be a big part of my life. I didn't feel that I connected much to the organization until I went on a leadership summer program last year. I immediately felt like I finally had a place in BYO. BBYO was an escape that I could go to more frequently when I needed a break. I am forever thankful for the memories and experiences I have made so far and hope to make a lot more in the future. My Jewish journey includes an incredible amount of memories and self-discovery. I would be a very different person today if I didn't have the experiences that camp and BBYO has given me. I know that as life goes on, I will learn and achieve more than I can comprehend now. My journey, both Jewish and self-accepting, is still being written, and I am excited to read the rest.
They shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not take up sword against nation. They shall never again know war. Don't stop after beating the swords. Into plowshares, don't stop. Go on beating and make musical instruments out of them. Whoever wants to make war again will have to turn them into plowshares first.
Shalom Ra Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam. Shalom Ra Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam. Ki
We take a moment now for silent prayer. Top of page 4, you'll find the words to Misha Berach, our prayer for hope and for healing, which we say with special fervor this evening on behalf of all of us and those we love, those in our congregation who are in need of healing and of hope, of body and of soul, for our world and our nation and our community, that we might find healing and support, for the courage to go forward, for the healing to make the world a better place. We ask God's blessing, and we pray for our ability to help make that better world. Confirmation is traditionally held on Shavuot, celebration of our receiving of the Torah and the Ten Commandments at Mount Sinai. It's taken us a while to get to Mount Sinai again, but we're able to celebrate that moment together again as we read the Ten Commandments, or more specifically as our confirmation class shares in that. We turn to page 4 and rise for the Shema.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo. Hear, O Israel, Adonai is our God, Adonai is one. Our God is one, Adonai is great, holy is God's name. Please be seated.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo.
Now please be seated.
Call on Andrew Title to do the blessing before the Torah.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Vaed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Bachav Banu Mikol Ha'amim V'natan Lanu Et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. Alex, will you lead us in the beginning of the Ten Commandments?
I would love to. Vaydaber Elohim et kol hadvarim ha'elech lemor. Anochi Adonai Elohecha, asher hotzeiticha me'eretz Mitzrayim, mi beit avadim.
Elizabeth?
Lo tisa et shem Adonai Elohecha lashav.
Emily?
Kabed et amecha ve'et imecha.
Katie?
Lo tirtzach, lo tinath, lo tignov, lo ta'aneh b're'acha, Eid shaker, lo tachmod. And God spoke all of these words, saying, I am your God, I am Adonai your God, who led you out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods besides me. Do not take the name of the Adonai your God in vain. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Honor your father and your mother. You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor, you shall not covet.
Andrew, you do the blessing after?
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah temet, v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu, Baruch atah Adonai, noten ha-Torah.
Amen.
Over my very limited time on this planet, being Jewish has always been a part of who I am, but its value has definitely changed over time and has helped me come to realize my flaws and strengths. An intelligent person, a procrastinator, easily distracted, and incredibly stubborn, to name a few. But it's good that I know these flaws because it will help me grow further on. At first, I viewed being Jewish as simply having a few extra days off and 8 days of a Christmas-like holiday. I was younger and oblivious, so I never really paid attention during services and always read the English translations instead of the Hebrew. But when I started to go to Sunday school and I began to learn, being Jewish was more deep and complex than what I thought. Being Jewish had a vast and complex history, important moral values, and was a guide in life if you needed it to be. I learned how to read Hebrew, learned the stories behind those holidays I enjoyed, and why we had them. I learned the story of Passover through the Ten Commandments movie at first, before learning about them more in depth in services. I learned why Purim was such a joyous day and why paying attention during Rosh Hashanah was so important. Eventually, I turned 13 and had my bar mitzvah. Leading up to it, I never did truly feel ready, so I watched Keeping Up with the Steins with my parents and learned that you never truly are ready until the day it happens. And on that day, I had my bar mitzvah, and everything went smoothly with no mistakes despite my nerves. After that day, I felt as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulder for the time being. I felt glad it was over, and I understood even more after that day. After my family left Cleveland, however, everything became new again. We didn't get to go to services as often due to the move, and when we settled down, we eventually got back into the groove, attending services when we normally did, with a few exceptions. Everything felt normal at the time, and then I learned about confirmation, and it was like my bar mitzvah all over again. Very important milestone of being Jewish, and it was approaching very fast. But I put it aside until last year when I turned 16. I saw a new hurdle I would face, but one that would pay off regardless. I began to gather my confirmation points, which wasn't hard, but in the classes I had, I learned even more about being Jewish. I learned about our roles in society, history, and how we evolved as a very dispersed population. It gave me an even newer and complex view of who I am and how it is part of my identity. Then COVID hit and everything became horrible real fast. I wasn't allowed to see my friends, go places, and everyone was afraid. But we still kept going with confirmation, and now today, as I read this speech to all of you who are here or watching from home, I realize that it's not so bad and it will all get better soon. And going into the future, I know being Jewish will shape who I am, what I do, and even how I will make decisions in life, because it has truly become one with my identity, and that is what I'm confirming today, my identity as a Jewish person.
Thank you, Andrew. I've been telling you guys stories since many of you were very little, and in some cases, since your parents got married, I was telling them stories. So I have this story for you today. Some of you may have heard this story, but it's different now because you're in this story now. It's a story about the receiving of the Ten Commandments, when the people of Israel, as was planned, gathered around the foot of Mount Sinai, and they were all standing there waiting to hear the words of the Ten Commandments from God's mouth, each of them, so that they would all know that these words had come from God Almighty. That was the plan, after all, and Moses had arranged it all very carefully. The people of Israel had gathered around the foot of Mount Sinai, and God was about to speak the Ten Commandments. But you see, the Ten Commandments aren't really Ten Commandments. The word for the Ten Commandments, the words that Alex read, was the 10 words. God was going to speak 10 words, and yet somehow there were a lot more than 10 words that you guys read. This story teaches us how that happened. So the people of Israel were standing there, and God was ready to speak the words, and Moses had arranged every bit of that moment. And then as God began to speak the first word, actually the first letter, actually the first sound of the first of the Ten Commandments, something really unexpected happened. See, the first word of the Ten Commandments is I, which in Hebrew is Anochi. And the first letter of the Ten Commandments is an Aleph, which is supposed to be silent. But God's Aleph, when God pronounced the first letter of the first word of the first commandment, was so awe-inspiring and so tremendous and so terrifying that it terrified the children of Israel, and they went running away and hid in their tents. This was not part of the plan. The people of Israel had to hear the Ten Commandments, the 10 words from God's own mouth, in order for them to know that these words had not been written by Moses or someone else, that God had actually given them as a gift to the children of Israel. Moses went chasing after them. No, you have to come back. They kept running. No, too frightening. You go get the Ten Commandments. We trust you. Well, after much negotiation, it was determined that the 70 elders of the people of Israel, the leaders of each of the tribes and the camps, they would be brave enough, and they would stand at the foot of Mount Sinai while everyone else hid far, far away, sort of social distancing to an extreme. And Moses went up to the top of Mount Sinai and received the Ten Commandments. God spoke the 10 words, which were the words of the Ten Commandments, and the elders of Israel, the 70, they stood at the foot of Mount Sinai, and each of them heard each word. But then the strangest thing happened. As they were walking back to the camp, still in the awe of the moment of having heard the Ten Commandments spoken by God's own mouth, if God has a mouth, the one turned to another and said, you know, that first word that God said, that was the best word. When God said, and he said the word that he had heard, he said that encompassed everything that was the Ten Commandments. And everyone looked at him and said, God didn't say that word. And he said, of course he did. I heard God's voice. But you see, each of them heard a different word. Each of the 70 elders had heard a different word for that first word. And then they realized that they each had heard a different word for the second word too. For every word, there were 70 words. And for each of the 10 Commandments, 70 words had come forth. And the words weren't different, really. They just weren't exactly the same. They'd each heard their own sort of version of each of those words. And what they really realized in the end was, it was only when they spoke all of their words that they really understood all that God had intended them to hear. That's a story about the importance of diversity, about the unique way in which all of us hears, sees, and experiences the world, and how if we really want to know what God wants of us in the world that God wants us to help to build, to make, we need to listen to each other and hear the words that God spoke to each of us, because none of us are all the way right, and none of us can be so truly wrong that there's not within it something of God's intention. So here's the part where you come in. Generations after generations, our people have spoken these words, and we've heard what they meant. But the interesting thing is, they continue to mean something a little bit different in every age. In every age, we hear these words, and they're the same words, but we're the ones that change. Our world changes. The words change. The meaning of the words, that's up to us to hear. And it's only when we listen to each other and we struggle to know what God would want of those words for us today that we really hear the words on Mount Sinai and they really become ours. So, confirmation class of 2020, you hear the words. You've spoken the words. Now they're yours to teach us what they mean. This is the time when I normally give you a hug. Can't do that. Or when I whisper in your ear, definitely can't do that. A special blessing for this confirmation day. You'll find a little envelope next to each of you with a blessing for you on this confirmation day. Why don't you read that now while we hear a wonderful anthem from generation to generation. L'Ador Vador. It's now my pleasure to introduce Reed Weinberg, who is at a deep social distance back there, but president of our congregation. Wanted to congratulate our confirmands for the year 2020.
Thank you. Does this work? Yes. This is one of my great privileges since I've become the president of the temple to be here at this ceremony. I certainly remember, I guess it was almost 30 years ago, I was confirmed. Rabbi Rapport, you were there.
I remember.
I look a little different. You look exactly the same.
Of course.
But it's an honor because we get the chance to say congratulations to young members of our congregation who are continuing on past their bar and bat mitzvahs to continue to build their Jewish identity and honor their faith, and especially honor their parents, their grandparents, their ancestors, all of the people that came before them, and I think that's very important. We have, at the president of the temple, you meet a lot of volunteers at the synagogue, a lot of dedicated congregants, and they're all different types of people. They all identify with Judaism differently, different levels of how religious they are. Some of them can't even read Hebrew, but they all believe that the temple is an important part of the Jewish community. If without the temple, there is no Jewish community of Louisville. It really is one of the linchpins of the community, and we use the temple as our outlet to build a strong Jewish community. And I think that's what you guys are doing by becoming confirmed and going through this process, and we appreciate you using the temple as an outlet to build a strong Jewish background. And the last thing I'll say is we hope you stay connected to the synagogue. We're really working very hard here to build a strong base of young congregants, and we're doing a really good job of it. We have more young families joining our synagogue now than we have had for decades. And I think over almost 40% of all of our new members over the past 2 years were young families under the age of 40. You guys aren't there yet. You're not young families or becoming a young family, but someday you will. And the foundation you're building tonight is going to help when you get to that point. So thank you for honoring us and honoring your congregation. And lastly, I want to thank a group of people that I don't think we do enough to thank. We honor the children and the young adults so much, but I want to thank the parents and the grandparents and guardians who put forth the effort to instill this in their children, encourage them to do this, kick them out of bed sometimes to go to Sunday school. It's not easy, but I think it's very important. I think we need to do a good job of saying thank you to you guys as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Reed. And now, through the hopeful magic again of the internet, we are going to bring you congratulations from the principal of the High School of Jewish Studies. Hang on. She's frozen.
I want to wish a hearty Mazal Tov to our 7 confirmation students and their families. You are truly a special class that has shown genuine resilience, flexibility, humor, camaraderie, and dedication to your Jewish education and your temple community. You guys have consistently shown up, pitched in, and been willing to try new things as we re-energized our program this year. You sang, meditated, traveled to DC, studied, definitely debated, and impressively stayed connected and insisted on marking this very special milestone together, even if it meant postponing this culminating moving service. So to Elizabeth, Elliot, Emily, Alex, Katie, Jack, and Andrew, Mazal Tov again. I'm so very proud of you.
We conclude our service now on page 5 with the reading before the Kaddish. Emily?
There are stars up above, so far away we can only see their light. Long, long after the star itself is gone. And so it is with people that we loved. Their memories keep shining ever brightly, though their time with us is done. But the stars that light up the darkest night, these are the lights that guide us. As we live our days, these are the ways we remember.
This week in our congregation, we remember the names of Lonnie Nafuzi and Gila J. Sate, William Braunstein, Anatoly Tarkanova, Harry L. Davis, Rosemary Payton, Leonard Dickman, Joe Peller, Isabel Atlas, Miles Friedman, Janetta Bloom Jacobs, Joe Bass, Norman Friedberg, Morris Levy, Saul M. Perlmutter, Albert Reiser, Nathan L. Horwitz, Alfred S. Joseph Sr., Clarence Miller, Yvette Weisberg, Louis Bick Flarsheim, Ann Gale Hellman, and Ethel Matla. Zichronam Livracha. May all their names live in blessing as we rise for Kaddish on page 5. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabba. Balma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chayachon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael. Bagala u'vizman kari v'imru. Amen. Yehi shmei Rabba mevorach le'olam ulmei olmaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei d'kudisha b'richu. Leilo min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata. Damiran be'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehi shlom Rabba min shemaya v'chayim. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn and comfort to all who are bereaved. And let us say together, Amen. Our closing song is Oseh Shalom, the last three lines of the Kaddish. May the one who makes peace in high heavens help us to make peace here on earth, now and always.
Oseh Shalom bimromah, Ya'aseh Shalom aleinu, V'al kol Yisrael, V'imiru Amen. Oseh Shalom bimromah, Ya'aseh Shalom aleinu, V'al kol Yisrael, Imru Amen. Oseh Shalom bimromah, Ya'aseh Shalom aleinu, V'al kol Yisrael, V'imiru Amen. Oseh Shalom bimromah, Ya'aseh Shalom aleinu, V'al kol Yisrael, Imru Amen. Imru Amen.
We ask God's blessing on these young confirmants, the leaders of our congregation who are rising before us. May they live lives of peace and justice and help us to build a world of peace and justice together. May God bless all of you, your families, and all those you love. May that blessing go forth from this congregation to all those here and all we share in the community that we love. Bruchim atem b'voachem, uvruchim atem b'tzeitechem, me'ata v'ad olam. Hallelujah. Blessed are you who have come here this day. Blessed are you as you go upon your way. From this time forth and forevermore, may you bless the name of God. Amen. Shabbat Shalom.
And Mazal Tov.